A warm greetings to all dear friends and passionate well-wishers committed to the care of our environment. It is my great pleasure to invite Ms. Abhisha Ashirvatham, Assistant Professor, Department of MBA, Loyola Academy, Secunderabad, to graciously anchor today's episode on 10 Green Commandments. Welcome, Madam.
Thank you, sir. Greetings to all the esteemed viewers of Divyavani TV. A warm and gracious welcome to this episode 2 on the second Green Commandment called Listen to the Cry of the Poor, in praise of the Creator who has lovingly gifted this earth, our common home, to all humanity. The students of St. Pius High School will now present a devotional dance performance.
సృష్టిని చేసిన దైవమా ఈశ్వరా పరమేశ్వరా అద్భుత సృష్టిని చేసిన దైవమా వాక్కుతో ప్రేమతో సకల విశ్వాన్ని కలిగించితివి వాక్కుతో ప్రేమతో సకల విశ్వాన్ని కలిగించితివి సకల జీవుల సంరక్షణను మాకొసగితివి సకల జీవుల సంరక్షణను మాకొసగితివి సృష్టి ప్రదాత వందనము జీవనదాత వందనము మహిమాన్విత తేజ వందనము వందనం ప్రభు వందనం వందనం ప్రభు వందనం వందనం ప్రభు వందనం వందనం ప్రభు వందనం.
Our sincere thanks to the students and staff of St. Pius High School for that beautiful and inspiring performance. It is now our honor and privilege to extend a warm welcome to His Excellency, Most Reverend Ivan Pereira, Bishop of Jammu, Srinagar and Chairman of the Commission for Environment and Climate Change (CBCI), to kindly grace this episode with his special introductory address and blessings.
His Holiness Pope Francis has gifted the Church and the world with the landmark encyclical title Laudato Si, reminding us that the earth is not merely a resource to be exploited, but a sacred gift entrusted to our care. Reverend Father Dr. Joseph Strom, Director of the Celestial University, Rome, has authored a profound and inspiring commentary on Laudato Si, presenting its message in the form of the 10 Green Commandments. Mr. M.D. Vincent, a renowned Telugu writer, has not only translated this work into Telugu, but also has taken the remarkable initiative of creatively presenting it in visual form through 10 television episodes. These episodes have received wide appreciation and blessings from Telugu Catholic Bishops' Council, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of India, and even the Vatican. I sincerely appreciate and thank Mr. M.D. Vincent as well as the generous sponsors and especially Divyavani TV, who have now jointly undertaken the ambitious mission of presenting these episodes in 22 Indian languages as well as in several international languages. I warmly invite generous individuals, heads of the institutions, foundations, and all people of goodwill to come forward and support this unique global educational initiative, an effort aimed at enlightening hearts and minds across the world to preserve and protect our Mother Earth, our common home.
With profound respect and heartfelt gratitude, we thank Our Excellency for those inspiring and thought-provoking introductory words. We now have the honor of inviting Reverend Father Arul Jyoti S.J., Commerce Vice Principal, Loyola Academy, Alwal, Secunderabad, to enlighten us on the second Green Commandment. Listen to the cry of the poor.
Dear people of God all over the globe, greetings to you from Loyola Academy, Hyderabad. The second Green Commandment invites us to hear the cry of the poor, who are the disproportionate victims of the degradation of our common home. One of the important contributions that Pope Francis makes in the encyclical is to integrate the concerns of the planet of the poor. He reminds us that ecological crisis is not so much talk about the extinction of polar bears or exotic pandas, but about the plight of millions of our less fortunate brothers and sisters, members of our common household. Francis speaks in this regard of the ecological debt that the developed worlds owe to the poorer nations and communities around the world. First, the crisis of a common home from the perspective of the poor. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis looks at the crisis of a common home from different perspectives: scientific, religious, economic, political, cultural, and so on. However, there is one perspective that stands out conspicuously. It is the ethical perspective, and that too from the vantage point of the poor and vulnerable persons and communities. Laudato Si is, in fact, a social encyclical than one on climate change. Climate is mentioned just 14 times in the text, while the poor 59 times, significantly almost as many times as the word creation, which appears 66 times. Pope Francis follows up the description of the alarming state of our common home on account of pollution, climate change, depletion of natural resources, and loss of biodiversity with the equal worrying situation of the concrete living surroundings of many of our fellow sisters and brothers around the world. He speaks of the dehumanizing urban landscapes and of the uninhabitable conditions of the many of our cities where the poor, the disposable of the society live. Francis is quick to note that the deterioration of the environment and of the society affects the most vulnerable people on the planet. Pope Francis drives home this message citing from the pastoral letters of the Bolivian and German bishops. The Pope decries the fact that on the global arena there is little in the way of clear awareness of the problems which especially affect the excluded. The poor are conveniently forgotten or ignored at the higher table of world affairs. Yet, as the Pope points out, they are the majority of the planet's population, billions of people. We quote him. Number 2, the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. The crisis has its worst impact on the poor. This is evident when he discusses pollution and the very first of the ecological questions addressed in the encyclical. He writes, quote, exposure to atmospheric pollutants produces a broad spectrum of health hazards, especially for the poor, and causes millions of premature deaths. People take sick, for example, from breathing high levels of smoke from fuels used in cooking or heating, unquote. Francis gives special attention to the consequences of global climate change on the poor, writing that the poor live in areas particularly affected by phenomena related to warming, and their means of subsistence are largely dependent on natural reserves and ecosystemic services such as agriculture, fishing, and forestry. They have no other financial activities or resources which can enable them to adapt to climate change or to face natural disasters, and their access to social services and protection is very limited. The poor have benefited least from the fossil fuels and are first line to suffer as the effects of global warming intensify. It is known that the world's poor contributes virtually nothing to global warming. According to Partha Dasgupta and Veerabhadran Ramanathan, the top 1 billion people are responsible for 50% of greenhouse gas emissions, a further 3 billion people for 45%, while the bottom 3 billion who do not have access to affordable fossil fuels are responsible for a meager 5%. Francis highlights the great discrepancy between the global north and south when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, with a special mention of Africa. Water scarcity and access to potable water as an issue of primary importance, though it is one rarely thought about in rich countries. Every day, unsafe water results in many deaths and the spread of water-related diseases, including those caused by microorganisms and chemical substances. Dysentery, cholera, linked to the inadequate hygiene and water supplies, a significant cause of suffering and of infant mortality. The indigenous communities, as Pope said, it is essential to show special care for the indigenous communities and their cultural traditions. They are not merely one minority among others, but should be the principal dialogue partners, especially when large projects affecting their land are proposed. When they remain on their land, they themselves care for it best. Nevertheless, in various parts of the world, pressure is being put on them to abandon their homelands to make room for agriculture or mining projects which are undertaken without regard for the degradation of nature and culture. Third point, ecological debt linking social justice and environmental justice. The most important question is the ecological debt incurred by the exploitation and unequal consumption of natural resources from the part of rich communities, and by the disproportionate emission of greenhouse gases leading to global warming and associated climate change. As Pope says, a true ecological debt exists, particularly between the global north and south, connected to commercial imbalances with the effects on the environment and the disproportionate use of natural resources by certain countries over long periods of time. The export of raw materials to satisfy markets in the industrialized north has caused harm locally, as for example in mercury pollution in gold mining or sulfur dioxide pollution in copper mining. The warming caused by huge consumption on the part of some rich countries has repercussions on the poorest areas of the world, especially Africa, where a rise in temperature together with a drought has proved devastating for farming. As Christian Aid has pointed out, for their disproportionate contribution to the causes of climate change and its adverse effects, developed countries owe a twofold climate debt: for overusing and substantially diminishing the Earth's capacity to absorb greenhouse gases, denying it to the developing countries that most need it in the course of their development. The developed countries have run an emissions debt to the developing countries for the adverse effects of these excessive emissions, contributing to the escalating losses, damages, and lost developments and opportunities facing developing countries have run up an adaptation debt to developing countries. The sum of these debts, emissions debt and adaptation debt, constitutes the climate debt of developed countries. The per capita emissions of the greenhouse gases from individuals show a profoundly unjust, scandalous disparity. It should also be remembered that such emission patterns are totally unsustainable for the carrying capacity of our home planet's atmosphere. If every person living in the developing world had the same carbon footprint as the average for high-income countries, we would require the atmospheres of 6 planets. With a global per capita carbon footprint at Australian levels, we would need 7 planets, and with per capita footprint of Canada and United States, we would require atmosphere of 9 planets. The rich, who overconsume the Earth's resources and overpollute its common atmosphere, are not limited to the developed world alone. The divide between the poor and the super rich is conspicuous in most of the developing countries. A scientific study led by Shoibal Chakravarti of Princeton University has shown how global projected emissions can be drastically reduced by engaging the 1.13 billion high emitters. Another mechanism to measure ecological debt is the ecological footprint of nations and individuals. The ecological footprint is an indicator of the human pressure on the physical world in terms of humanity's consumption of natural resources, use of ecological services, and production of pollution and waste. There exists a huge disparity in the consumption of natural resources across the globe, which reveal scandalous differences in the ecological footprints of individuals and communities. According to 2022 Earth Overshoot Day analysis, if everyone lived like those in Qatar, we would require 9 Earths. In the case of United States, Canada, and United Arab Emirates, 5.1 Earths would be needed. 4.1 Earths for Australia, 3 Earths for Germany, 2.4 Earths for China, 1.6 Earths for Brazil, 0.8 Earths for India, 0.6 Earths for Bangladesh, and 1.7 Earths for world at large. Point 4. Eco-justice, a common but a differentiated responsibility. All of humanity needs to work together to avert the current ecological crisis, as it is the common home of the earth which is in peril. However, Francis reiterates the principle of differentiated responsibilities. When it comes to the question of policies to be adopted by nations for the mitigation of anthropogenic climate change, Pope affirms that there is a pressing need to calculate the use of environmental space throughout the world for depositing gas residues which have been accumulating for 2 centuries and have created a situation which currently affects all the countries of the world. Pope Francis therefore calls for common and differentiated responsibilities, a principle for long enshrined in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The countries which have benefited from a high degree of industrialization at the cost of enormous emissions of greenhouse gases have a greater responsibility for providing a solution to the problems they have caused. All persons are born equal and have equal rights to the resources of our home planet, our common habitat, and to its common atmosphere. The fact of living in our common home and being members of our common home and human family confers on each human person the right to equal ecological space. It is vital this global common home should be shared equally. As Pope Paul VI wrote, God intended the earth and everything in it for the use of all human beings and peoples. Created goods should flow fairly to all. Pope Francis considers the notion of the common good a central and unifying principle of social ethics. The encyclical clearly reveals how the crisis of common home is not just a physical one, but also a profoundly moral one, calling for eco-justice. The question of eco-justice is indeed one of the main challenges, unpleasant as it may be, raised by the encyclical. Francis speaks on behalf of the poor and the vulnerable, becoming a clear voice for the multitude of voiceless victims of the crisis of our common home. According to him, every ecological approach needs to incorporate a social perspective which takes into account the fundamental rights of the poor and the underprivileged. The crisis of our common home is one of the greatest ethical dilemmas of our time. He writes in the first of the concluding prayers to the encyclical, O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned, the forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it.
Our sincere thanks to Reverend Father Aral Jyoti SJ, Commerce Vice Principal, Loyola Academy, Alwal, Secunderabad, for that enlightening and deeply inspiring reflection. I now invite Father N. Shauri Kishore SJ, Parish Priest of St. Francis Xavier Parish, Alwal, Secunderabad, to kindly present a brief summary of the talk on the second Green Commandment.
The second Green Commandment. Listen to the cry of the poor. So here is the deal. Pope Francis, the OG Eco CEO, basically tells us that Mother Earth is crying. The ones getting soaked the worst are not the rich folks sipping lattes in their climate control mansions. They are the poor. In his encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis says, hey, caring for the planet isn't just about saving polar bears and pandas for Instagram posts. It's about humans who are getting roasted, flooded, poisoned. Poor people get hit first, hardest by pollution, heat waves, rising seas, and everything else climate change throws at them. Cities, total chaos. Concrete jungles with zero green space. Imagine living in a place where your view is asphalt. Your neighbor's cars honk like constant foghorn symphony, and their air smells like a burnt rubber. This is the reality for millions, according to Pope Francis. And do not get him started on water. The stuff that literally keeps humans alive is a luxury. For some, unsafe water is basically a daily lottery for dysentery and cholera fun times. Meanwhile, the rich keep partying with fossil fuels, emitting greenhouse gases like confetti at a wedding, and acting surprised when the poor catch the fallout. The numbers are wild. The top 1% puff out more CO2 than the poorest 50% combined. Africa, minimal emissions, but mass suffering. Climate migrants, they are not even officially recognized. Francis is basically saying, hey wealthy world, stop hoarding carbon like it is a Bitcoin. Enter ecological debt, the fancy way of saying the rich owe the poor a huge apology and maybe some actual help. This includes emission debts and adaptation debt. The Pope also drops the mic on eco-justice. We all live on one planet, but some folks have been throwing a 2-century-long global ranger while others clean up the mess. The solution, common but differentiated responsibility, which is basically everyone pitch in, but those who made the greatest mess fix the biggest part. It's morality. Don't trash the apartment and leave the roommate to deal with the roaches, floods, and toxic fumes. Pope Francis wants us to act responsibly, love the poor, and maybe pray a little while doing it. Bottom line, care for the planet, care for each other, and stop being a climate villain. Mother Earth deserves better, and so do the humans who live on her.
Thank you, Father N. Shauri Kishore SJ.
Welcome to Loyola Academy, where knowledge meets character.
School of Commerce. We build strong foundations in business with real-world learning.
School of Sciences. Ignite innovation and practical problem-solving skills.
School of Arts and Humanities. A space for cultural expression and many more.
School of Management. Develop confident leaders ready for the corporate world.
School of Informatics. Students gain cutting-edge skills.
Campus life. Education goes beyond classrooms.
Join Loyola.
Based on the second Green Commandment, listen to the cry of the poor, the students of St. Pius High School will now present a thematic dance performance.
పచ్చని 10 ఆజ్ఞలుగా పదిలంగా పాటించుము సోదరా. అరే పచ్చని 10 ఆజ్ఞలుగా పదిలంగా పాటించుము సోదరా. ఓ సోదరా, అందు రెండవ ఆజ్ఞ ఇదియేరా, పేదల రోదన గాంచుమురా. అందు రెండవ ఆజ్ఞ ఇదియేరా, పేదల రోదన గాంచుమురా. ధ్వంసము చేయుట మానుమురా, విధ్వంసము మానుమురా, రక్షణకై శ్రమించరా. పరిరక్షణ చేయుమురా, పరిరక్షణ చేయుమురా, పరిరక్షణ చేయుమురా, పరిరక్షణ చేయుమురా.
As we come to the close of today's inspiring episode, we offer our heartfelt and profound gratitude to their eminences, the cardinals and all the bishops and archbishops of TCBC and CBCI for their visionary leadership and dedicated service to our beloved nation, Bharat. We thank His Excellency Most Reverend Ivan Pereira, Bishop of Jammu Srinagar and Chairman of the Commission for Environment and Climate Change (CBCI) for his gracious presence, insightful introduction and constant encouragement and pastoral blessings. We thank Reverend Sister Linda CSA, Principal of St. Pius High School, Ramnagar, along with her talented and dedicated students for the beautiful and devotional dance performance. We thank Reverend Father Lurdu Raju SJ, CEO of Divyavani Social Communications, and Reverend Father Prashant, Program Director, and the entire team of Divyavani TV, whose tireless efforts made this mission possible. We thank Mr. M.D. Vincent, producer, scriptwriter and director of this inspiring series, and our sincere appreciation to all our generous advertisers, sponsors whose financial support strengthens and sustains this notable environmental initiative. Join us again next week at the same time as we explore the third commandment. Until then, keep watching Divyavani TV. Thank you.
And accompany creation as it groans in travail. You also dwell in our hearts, and you inspire us to do what is good. Praise be to you, Triune Lord, wondrous community of infinite love. Teach us to contemplate you in the beauty of the universe, for all things speak of you. Awaken our praise and thankfulness for every being that you have made. Give us the grace to feel profoundly joined to everything that is. God of love, show us our place in this world as channels of your love. For all the creatures of this earth, for not one of them is forgotten in your sight.
పితయైనా సర్వేశ్వరా, సకల ప్రాణుల సమేతంగా మీకే స్తుత్రం. చెల్లించుచున్నాము అనంతమైన హస్తము చేతనే సృజింపబడినది.